then we'll hang around to the bus.
I'll call this whole meeting to order at 6 p.m. in council chambers. Is there any public comment? You don't have any?
Nope, I do
I think
not.
Chief is checking out there. Nope. All right, then questions on the agenda. Then we move to our agenda items. Number 1, pavement management services contract. Mr. Vitas?
Come on up, Joe.
Go ahead.
Yep, thank you, Your Honor, Council. Tonight we have, and I have a gentleman here, the vendor is going to give us 5 minutes to kind of demonstrate this software program that we have chosen to get approval from you. We are going to recommend approval of this software. It is a PCI rating system. It's a truck that goes around with equipment, specialized equipment, assesses our pavement. It assesses our pavement, it collects that data, and it puts that data into a, this is essentially a software, an Excel spreadsheet with some tools in it to help us budget for future, analyze our current roads, and help us decide where to invest our funds, how to get to where we want to go. If we're down here at a 60, we want to get to an 80, it's going to give us that roadmap more or less on how to get our roads to that spot. So he's going to share his screen and kind of walk through the tools a little bit. Show you the tools that we're going to present to you when this is all up and ready, and if you guys have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them at that point.
Thank you.
Jeff, thank you.
Hi, how's everybody this evening?
Very good.
Good, thank you.
Sorry, I was just seeing if you could hear me. My name is Jeff Myers, and I'm with Infrastructure Management Services. We are an engineering firm that specializes in pavement data collection. And I will try not to bore you with too much engineering late on a Tuesday night, but just rest assured that we've been doing this for a while. We specialize in cities and counties, all types of pavement projects. We're fully staffed with all pavement-focused professionals. We have the largest collection fleet that's dedicated to municipal management in the U.S. And I put a few clients down there. We've worked with over 1,000 cities and counties over the past 35 years, and a lot of your neighbors, a lot of people that are pretty close to you geographically. And I always like to start with this slide. There are a lot of people will ask me, why would you do pavement management? It's to boil it down to the very essentials. If you look at a street, the life of a street, when it's brand new, first 40% of that pavement's life, it really doesn't deteriorate much, just about 15%. But the next 15% of the pavement's life, it kind of falls off a cliff, quality-wise, so to speak. It'll deteriorate about 40% in the next 15%. So our goal is to keep your maintenance strategies toward the top of that curve, where the costs are astronomically less, and create a curve that looks more like this. Inexpensive rehabs done at the top end of that deterioration curve. Just a brief look at what we're working with. This is an LCMS2 laser vehicle collection. We have 8 of these currently in service. They are the latest and greatest technology. They're also mounted with 4 high-speed digital cameras, so we can take imagery of everything in the road and the right-of-way as we drive. Here's a look at the quality of the imagery that we're collecting, and we use this internally for QC purposes. Although we're collecting electronically, we still have to have an engineer put eyeballs on every one of those 15-foot frames and just make sure that we can pass the eyeball test with what the equipment is picking up. Our analysis is very data-driven. From the condition data, there's kind of 2 steps in a project, giving you a current point-in-time assessment. So after we drive the roads, we'll send a very detailed analysis of where the city is at this point in time from a condition standpoint. We include all of the segment level data, but we also include some top-down network analysis views that you can easily consume. And you're looking at City of Huntsville, Texas. You can see we've broken the condition down into different ranges and rated them good, fair, poor type verbiage. And we look at the metrics for that condition data, both at a segment level and also at a network level. We're looking to see the overall condition score, the entire network. How many really good roads are in the city? Because those don't cost a lot to maintain. Conversely, how many really bad roads are in the city? Because those are budget eaters. And then the overall shape of that curve. And what we're trying to arrive at, this is probably more than you want to look at, but we're trying to put all the data together into a cost-optimized priority list for rehabilitation. So we're not necessarily looking at the worst roads first in a network. We're trying to identify the projects that it will cost the city the most not to get to in a given year. So we're looking for projects that are drifting through to a more expensive rehab category if they aren't treated the next year or two. That's kind of the summary of what you see before we begin the analysis. At that point, we start talking to Joe quite a bit and trying to get kind of into the city's business, so to speak. We'll ask questions about the budget that's going to be applied to the network, what the localized rehabs that are used are, and what the cost per square yard, how the budget is parsed out. Do we want to look at different zones of the city and split cost equally among zones? Do we want to prioritize roads around schools and hospitals? There's 1,000 ways you can customize an analysis, but at the end of the day, this is where we're trying to arrive. We want an intersection of condition, budget, and rehab. So you can see this is for the city of the Colony, Texas. That blue line is just our trend line. You can see all different colored lines represent different levels of expenditures and where that level of expenditure will take the city over the next 5 years. And we'll offer more looks at that than you want to see. But as a rule of thumb, we always want to include the blue line on the top. That's what would happen if the city wrote a check to do the prescribed rehab on every segment in the city and then didn't do anything else over 5 years. And then the black line at the bottom is what would happen if the city didn't spend a penny on road rehabilitation over the next 5 years. What effect would that have on the scores, both from a condition standpoint and from a rehab standpoint? How many really bad roads that create over a 5-year period? And this is probably the information that you'll be the most interested in studying. We leave all of that data behind in a very large interactive spreadsheet that can operate as a very, very effective pavement management system for the city. All the data resides in this tool, and everything that you're seeing in yellow is editable on the city's end. So you have the ability to maintain current data year-round. You have the ability to run scenarios, test different budget levels or different expenditure levels. It's very customizable. And that is a very quick overview. Joe told me I had 5 minutes, so I tried to compress it. I think I hit it. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you would have.
Yes, Mr. Waldron.
I have a question for you. We have a very good system of rating our infrastructures, our water, sewer, and stormwater. When you talk about the software is customizable, is it fairly easy to put in the data we have for water, sewer, and stormwater?
Where does the data reside for water, city, and stormwater, or water and stormwater?
I believe that data resides in Lucity,
Right.
a software program. So this information that we collect here, if we went with a citywide management system, whether it be Lucity or many others, we could upload this data into that and kind of work it both ways. He's leaving it to us in an Excel sheet with that ability to down the road, once that is established, move it and use it consistently with those. I didn't know Storm and had it all collected and in there that way.
Storm's
so far.
the weakest of the three.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we would perform this step if we were going to load data into a Lucity instance. We would still probably load it into the spreadsheet and configure the spreadsheet to the Lucity configuration for upload.
So you would take into regard the condition of the infrastructure underneath the pavement?
That would be something on the Lucity end,
Okay.
because the only data that we would have would be pavement data. But we can load that data into a Lucity asset management system that's citywide.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Okay.
Mr. O'Brien?
So what's the time frame that you would do this study? This is gonna be, how long is this gonna take?
So they'll deploy next spring when the snow's melted and temperatures are above 32 degrees. Collect the data, put it into the process. We won't have it until end of summer, early fall next year.
In time for CIP?
We would have it in time for CIP or 2023.
Yeah.
I'll have a list to you before then. We're going to be when we have already started some design on those, so we're working ahead. 24 more realistically is probably where this is going to go at 24, 25, 26 and on. And Jeff, we can run 5, 10, 15-year budget programs with this, so we can look as far out as we need to at that point.
Thank you.
But it's definitely gonna have to be compatible with storm and water. I mean,
So the compatibility is going to come from us when it spits out the list of roads that it suggests we do. We'll look within Lucity and work with Tony to, if this road needs infrastructure underneath of it, but we're not able to do that, we would pull that road off of the list, get the next suggestion, and move it around that way. So it's not a hard and fast list, but it's a tool for us to
okay.
start, and then we would work with the utilities to make sure we're doing it properly.
Is there another hand? Mr. Went?
Yeah, I guess two things. One, I've got some concern. I just want to make sure that we don't wind up running into issues like we've had in the past where we redo an area and don't do the water, the sewer underneath. But the other was, how often in these communities that you've worked in do you come back and do another analysis of the community to see how much progress we're actually really making? My concern is that, we take a snapshot in time, and then 3 years from now, just because of a really bad winter, cold, whatever, that some of these things may change over time. How does that typically work within your system?
Jen?
Yeah, you're exactly correct. If my 5-year rehab plan was spot on 100% pinpoint accurate, it would probably stay configured for 6 months tops. It's not really due to the data, it's due to the speed at which this industry changes. Over time, right now, I'm sure Joe's concrete costs are through the ceiling, and I'm sure he probably didn't have that forecasted 2 years ago. There are times when the city wants a road fixed, whether it's cost optimal or not. There are other concerns that the city will have than cost optimization. So one of the nice things about that spreadsheet is we're analyzing the segment at the segment level, so block to block, but we're putting segments together into meaningful projects, and the spreadsheet makes those segments very easy to shift around. So if there's a road that we can force a road into the analysis, click enter, and the analysis spins around it in subsequent years. If you miss a project in a given year, you can push it out of the analysis. It's kind of a constantly evolving thing. And my mission in life is to be able to call Joe in 2 years and say, hey, Joe, what's the current PCI for your asphalt collectors? And if he put all of his work into the spreadsheet, updated the scores, you should have current data, and it should be able to tell me within 15 seconds.
So those roads in Moline last year that came out of the winter a 0,
Right.
went into the winter a 50, came out a 0. We could go into the spreadsheet, change those segments of road that came out that way. It would automatically adjust total scores and things like that. So as long as we and our staff is diligent about updating the improved roads and then also updating the roads that we know come out and worsen, it should be fairly accurate. And then within the 3 to 5 years is the standard, I think, from when the time they shoot to the reshoot.
Oh, reshoot is 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, 3 to
Okay.
5 years is kind of an industry. It's what I've been told as I've researched this, but as long as we're updating it within those 3 to 5 years, our analysis should be fairly accurate. It's going to give us a much better tool to decide where we're going to invest our money.
Yep, Mr. Waldron.
Exactly. You need to get this budgeted, put it in for every 3 years to get it done. Currently, our program is subjective. I send out James, and he's a tech. Mike Waldron's a tech. I look at the road different than what James does. It's a little subjective. Not that they've done anything wrong, but this takes a little bit of the subjectivity out of it. And I highly recommend that we just slot it in every 3 years or whatever Joe recommends to, and keep it alive. It'll pay off much better down the road.
Mr. Schmidt?
Well, this is a little bit of a nitpicky in the weed question a little bit, but on the agreement, it talks about ownership of documents, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding that's basically saying the back end, the notes, the formulas, the inputs is what's remaining the property of the company, because then we would receive as the output the actual PCI and that sort of thing. I mean, that's going to be a matter of public record, so we'd have to own it or have that ownership access to it. That's not in conflict with that provision?
No, not at all. All that we are looking to protect is methodology and formulation.
Cool.
And Mr. Macias?
So by having this, and let's say we do it every 3 years, would we have to like change some sort of policy when people start complaining about their streets that they have to meet a certain criteria, or?
No, I don't think I don't think we can write a policy that is that down in the weeds also, because that's getting down there. It's if we as a group and engineering comes and says we need to, our arterial, asphalt roads we need to work on these, or like Mr. Alderman Waldron wants to do $3 million in residential neighborhoods. We're going to focus that in there anyway. So that's the kind of policies where you guys can help guide us and say we want to do this low income section of the town, or we want to work around the mall, or we want to work around schools, like he says. Those are the policy things that you guys are going to be able to help guide us. We can put those parameters into this tool, and it's going to help us analyze and spend the money appropriately in those areas. When somebody calls and complains, again, pass it on to staff, and we'll go through the same thing we always do, and look at their complaint and repair and maintain what we can, and we'll have that side by side. We'll have those notes side by side saying this one, the block over is a little bit worse, or it's a little bit better, and it's scheduled in 7 years. If everything goes as planned, we'll be there in 2029. So it could push it out that far to where we can answer it at least, and give them something at least to look forward to. So there are those things, but I don't know when policy is going to be made at this level.
Mr. Waldron?
I make a motion to approve the purchase.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Waldron, seconded by Alderman Schmidt. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you very much. Number 2, USPS lease agreement. Ms. Christopoulos?
So this is the 5-year lease agreement for 73 spaces to the post office. This is a 5-year extension from your original lease with them. The highlights is noted in the car are that the rent increases a little bit. There's more favorable terms for the city with respect to terminating the lease, both preventing the post office and then allowing the city to do that. Our extension expires at the end of the year, so this would, if approved, still then.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Went, seconded by Alderman Waldron. Any discussion? Mr. Went?
I just want to thank you guys for going back and figuring this out and giving us a little bit more flexibility, because depending on how development flows downtown, it's really important that we have that flexibility built in, so thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Number 3, QCon Hub Memorandum of Understanding. Chief Galt.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Tonight, I'm joined virtually online by Cecilia Bailey, the Executive Director of the Quad Cities Open Network. She's here, obviously, in support of a recommendation to enter into an MOU with QC Open Network in the city of Moline, but also to answer any questions that I might not be able to. Back October 13th, when we were in the other room at one of the workshops, I proposed to you this handout about the Quad City Open Network, and you all were in favor of exploring that opportunity to join the network and be one of the first, or the first municipality to join QC Open Network. So the purpose of this memorandum is to join QCon and the hub, which is the integrated referral and intake system, to link people to inform and link people to information and community resources, to facilitate collaboration, streamline communication around referrals, and close the referral communication loop. The QCon Hub will act as a connection point between member agencies to connect Quad citizens to community resources. In order to do so, member agencies will utilize IRIS, a web-based referral application and community database that supports warm handoffs for households and improves communication among partners by streamlining the referral process, closing the communication loop for referring organizations and giving communities a clear, data-driven picture of partner capacity. So staff recommends approval of this MOA, and again, Cecilia probably can assist me with answering any of your questions.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve by Alderman Went, seconded by Alderman Schmidt. Thank you. Any comments, questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Number 4, amending Council Bill / General Ordinance number 3031-2021. Mr. Vitas.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, members of council. Before you tonight is the amending ordinance for number 3031-2021, which is the tax levy ordinance for fiscal year 2022, calendar year 22 fiscal year. From the time that we started the process of preparing the budget to the time that we concluded our last meeting on the 16th of November, as you know, we had the pension obligation bond project that had been going on for a few months during the preparation of the budget. And the day after our regular council meeting and setting the tax levy that evening, the pension obligation bond sold the next day. And because of the successful results of that sale, the city is the beneficiary or recipient of about $872,902 for fiscal 2022. And that's based upon a number of things that took place. Of the $872,902 in savings, the first factor was the bond sale itself, and the ability based upon the actuarial reports to reduce the bonding from $90,575,000 down to the $85,075,000. That resulted in a net annual debt service savings of $354,263. The reduced interest rates, they had projected a 3% interest rate in terms of going forward at the $90,575,000. The actual interest rate was 2.88425. That creates the $354,263 of savings that we will realize annually during the life of the bonds through 2041. In addition to that, when the actuaries did their work resulted in a savings, an additional savings based on actuarial results of $518,639. And that was basically a reduction in contributions that are needed to fund the city's remaining 15% unfunded liability and our normal costs that were calculated on November the 18th. So on November 18th, we had great results, and we ended up with a savings of $518,639. As I mentioned in the email, and I'll say for the record here, that needs to be reevaluated annually because it's going to fluctuate based upon the actuarial report on those two pension funds. And that's the normal process, so that we make sure that whatever that dollar amount is, that we calculate it going forward. That said, Carol and I put our heads together and had a discussion. It was late Friday afternoon, and then we followed up last week on Monday and into Tuesday. And we discussed how to go about plugging other arteries that have been bleeding for some time. Of course, the pension, police and fire pensions was one artery that we were able to successfully stop the bleeding on. But one of the other ones that's always been problematic the past 10 years was TIF number 7. So in order to stop the bleeding there to some degree, basically some triage, we looked at putting the $354,263 and apply that against the TIF obligation that we have to meet annually. By doing that, without going into all the details in the latter pages that you received, that reduced from $9.2 million at the close of the TIF in 2035. It reduces that liability down to about $4.1 million in today's dollars. So it literally is cutting in half the liability that all taxpayers have been really obligated to contribute toward through their property taxes all these years. That's not to say that we will need to keep that 354 going forward every year until the end of the TIF, because the goal here is to reinvigorate that TIF, get that business park up, get it up and running, and when it does produce the revenue equal to and greater than the 354,000, obviously that 354,000 would be used elsewhere, and hopefully we would be able to eliminate all of the debt. The other two places we talked about was the Parks Fund and the Library Fund, and based on our reserve policies, bringing the reserves back up in those two particular funds, both for library as well as for parks, and we split the remaining $518,639 between the two funds in order to bring those reserves back up from the numbers that were shown when we prepared the budget and as we got to where we are today. So the great news is we had some significant savings I don't think that were probably anticipated. It might have been better if the bonds had sold 6 months ago or 7 months ago, perhaps, because it would have been good to know this information then. But timing is everything, and where we are today is we're sitting on an $872,000 windfall in a lot of respects, which will give us some flexibility going forward, not only with TIF number 7, but also funding those two reserves up to a level where they're supposed to be based on fiscal policy of council. So with that, we're recommending approval of the ordinance with the November 30th amendment with $354,263 going into the general fund to be used in TIF number 7 for that debt, and then increasing the park fund from $1,730,854 to $1,989,903. In turn, the library fund increasing that from $3,058,677 to $3,317,997, with the total tax levy remaining the same at $15,306,321.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Macias, seconded by Alderman Schmidt. Discussion? Mr. Macias?
I just want to say, yeah, it's not every day that we get this kind of windfall. So I think we don't need to rush the decision-making on all of the full amount where we don't really have to. Really, for that reason, I'd like to amend this motion to put the full $872,902 into the general fund, and off of that, put $400,000 to TIF 7, because I feel like we need to really address that. And then just direct staff to come back in January with a budget amendment to allocate the remaining $472,902.
Second.
All right, there's an amendment on the table for discussion. Oh, sorry, I need to tell you. A motion by Alderman Messiah, seconded by Alderman Timmy. Thank you. Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Your Honor. So can you, to clarify, we were still going to pay the TIF 7. How is that 354,000 being paid? How is it being addressed in the budget?
How is the TIF
Previously.
being budgeted now? The general fund actually pays for the debt of the TIF on an annual basis.
So,
So this would be almost like additional seed money going in from the general fund to TIF number 7 to pay that debt.
so this would be over and above what we've already budgeted,
Yes, it would.
not just replacing it. Okay.
Not replacing it, but over and above.
All right, thank you.
Mr.
Bob, I'd like your opinion on Alderman Macias's amendment. Do you think that is worthwhile to do, or what's your opinion of that amendment?
I can't predict what the council might do with the amendment in January. You know, it's just, if we do the amendment in January, the question is, there's a couple questions. You know, what will council want to do with the additional $472,000? Do you still, in January, want to apply it to Parks and Recreation and Library, or do you want to apply it to some other purpose in January after you've had some time to think about it? I think that's what that amendment is doing, is giving you time to think about it, since nobody really today, we haven't had prolonged discussions on it. It's a lot of money.
So it doesn't preclude us from putting it right in Parks and Library at that time?
You can amend the budget at any time, because the budget is a guiding tool. It's basically a tool, and we can amend it. I mean, at one point, I had talked to Carol even about taking the entire $872,000 and just putting it into TIF 7, and then not have the debt. Eliminating that problem, basically stopping that bleeding entirely, that might reduce it almost to zero. Without calculating the actual number, we estimate it'd be almost paying for the full amount. So that's enough. There's a lot of alternatives. I just don't think we've had a lot of time to think every alternative through on such short notice.
Thank you.
Mr. Went?
I guess, point of information, the bond that we have for TIF number 1,
TIF
I
number
guess,
1
or just TIF number 7, I apologize.
Seven.
For TIF number 7, it was my understanding that there was, some kind of prepayment penalty or something on that, or is that not the case? Because we had talked about refinancing it at a lower rate.
Mm-hmm.
I guess if the concept is that this additional $354,000 is going to be a payment over and above what our amortized amount is due, there's no problem with prepayment?
Carol did not mention that to me when we had our discussions, that there was a prepayment penalty. Lori, do you know if there's a prepayment penalty in that particular bond issue?
I do not know.
Yeah.
Because I guess
It's a good
at one point
question.
we had talked about, I mean, because interest rates, I'm assuming right now, are lower than what
They've ever
interest. Why wouldn't we then, if we could prepay it and refinance at a much lower interest rate, why wouldn't we take care of that issue that way? Or to help with that issue?
There's a lot of alternatives.
Well,
Alderman
it's
Wentz.
not, there seems to be some kind of logic disconnect if that's what's happening. And that's my concern, is I was under the impression that we were basically gonna move this $354,000 to pay part of that debt service that we owed this year that was scheduled, which would then free up $354,000 to basically just increase the reserve balance. But that doesn't seem what's being
No.
explained here, is that it is additional prepayment, because if that's the case, I mean, we've got extra reserves sitting around that we could prepay more of this, or we could refinance it.
I don't think that discussion's ever been had, and because that's the first time hearing that. I mean, other than.
Well, I know that we've talked about it every time. I was like, why wouldn't we?
Just pay off the debt.
Well,
if
I
you
mean, why
can.
wouldn't we refinance any of these things that are at a higher interest rate, as long as the issuance cost isn't more than what we're going to save?
It's certainly something that should be explored.
Well, I think we
I don't
have
have the answer tonight.
been exploring it ongoing, and I guess, I think we need to get that question answered, because that changes the dynamic quite a bit, because we could refinance it and lower our payments on this, then that becomes another windfall upon another windfall.
It could,
And so
it could.
I'm hesitant here on making the decision based on non-complete information.
Would you like to modify your motion to make anything researchable and explorable?
Yeah, I get it. Okay, how do I go about this? So amend the amendment
Well, you just modify.
or modify my amendment to explore other options that could save us even more by refinancing if needed. I guess that would be, yeah, that would be the right wording, right?
Well,
Because
So
I just,
if I repeat what I believe you said, do you have it pulled up?
Yeah,
It
let's
was
hear it.
what his motion was.
Oh, I'm sorry. Move to reallocate the full savings to the general fund with $354,263 applied to TIF number 7.
No,
I had 400.
he had 400,000.
Yeah.
Oh, you had the full
Yeah,
400.
I wanted more,
Sorry.
basically.
Yeah, to TIF number 7, and then you could say
Modify it
modify it at a comma,
to
or
explore
to explore
bonding that could.
refinancing.
Refinancing, yes, to save
And
us even more.
confirm the prepayment penalty.
Prepayment penalty.
Question.
And confirm the prepayment penalty, yes. Wasn't aware of.
yeah,
But-
well, and I'm not sure either. I'm just,
No.
the question becomes, why wouldn't we
So it's just a question.
refinance it if?
Another question.
Well, the question remains, why wasn't that done already? There's
Exactly.
there's people
I
on
ask that
this
question?
council who've been looking at TIF 7 bleeding for years, so we're at a point where we could really do something about it. Mr. Moyer.
Thank you. I was just going to assume, like you said, we don't have to make a decision today. We could just table this a week, get the information, and make the motion next week. No,
I,
Not enough time.
not enough time.
no. I mean, we need to
Okay.
adopt the budget next week. I mean, we're basically at the end of the road. So, I think the point that Alderman Went brings up is an interesting point about all the TIF debt and whether or not it's been looked at previous to my being here in terms of potential refunding, because you're right, there are some that you cannot refund early, and there are those that have passed that date who may perhaps have not been refunded. But that's the first time I've heard anything about that discussion in the past 5 months.
Many times.
I've been
You may
talking
have
about
been,
it for years.
for years, exactly,
And let
so.
me, sorry, I should be calling on people. And also, I want to just point of clarity or order, did we need a second to his modification?
He seconded.
I
Oh, it's not-
I
I'll
didn't
second
hear
the
that.
modification.
Thank you.
It's really not
So,
part of that.
Can I hear that modification? Mayor, can I hear the modification?
with the
No, to know what
modification,
we're
could you
doing
please
because it's
read
really
the
important.
modification?
Yes. Alderman Macias, seconded by Alderman Timian,
Please,
move to.
please, one person talking at a time, thank you.
Please, go ahead.
Alderman Macias, seconded by Alderman Timian, move to modify the amendment to explore bond refinancing and confirm the prepayment penalty. Or whether there is a prepayment penalty.
Correct.
Is that not correct? Okay.
And adopting when we adopt the ordinance that is before council this evening, setting the levy at 15,306,321, are we doing it based on then the action of November 16th and not addressing the $872,000 tonight?
No, his
Or are
motion
we
has
putting
putting it all
forth-
into, putting everything
General
into the general fund.
All of
And
it
then
into the
moving
general fund
400
reserve and not into
with the caveat.
any of the funds that were recommended, and then to be brought back in January for further discussion.
Correct.
And possible amendment. So the money would all go into the general fund reserve.
Correct.
Yes,
Correct.
Mr. Wynn.
And just point of clarification for you, tonight is just the first read on the council
On the
agenda.
amendment.
So we will have next week
Right.
to get some of these questions answered, and if we want to modify it on the second reading next week, we have that.
I thought that was true, but in looking at it, Lori, can you verify, are you needing consideration this evening so that we can adopt next meeting? And Bob, maybe you know the answer to that,
I mean, we have to adopt the budget.
next time. So I
Yeah.
think we do need consideration this evening.
Yeah, I
There
think
will
he
be
said
cons-
that.
No, he said this is only the first reading.
It is only the first.
Right.
In looking at this, it looks like consideration was
This was the
requested.
second reading.
It's on.
I
No,
thought
it's
Carol was
under
asking
first
for
reading
consideration.
ordinance. No,
Yeah,
I
it's
know, but
under
you see
first
consideration
reading,
next to
right.
it?
Yeah, but it's asking for consideration. But that becomes my problem with asking for consideration on something that we're not clear on. I
It's only because we're
Excuse me,
right up to.
we can't just talk back and forth. I mean, I'd have to call on everyone, because otherwise we'll lose track of the conversation and the details. Could you please point to where it says for consideration? I'm not
Those-
seeing it.
Well, the boxes to the right
Oh, I see.
are there,
Are you on
so
the
that
coun-
was
is
the
council
intention.
agenda?
And I'm just asking for verification whether this needs to be, have a final vote this evening in order for everything to pass on the 7th, as intended by the finance director.
That's not our normal procedure. I think it was just we needed to move it to first reading this week so that we could have the final consideration next week, or the final adoption
Do you have
next.
that schedule from Carol?
Yes, Mr. Went.
Yeah,
I
but
don't.
what they're saying is typically on the first reading, it would just go through, and then on the second reading, we would adopt it. What the clerk is saying is that staff or whoever put this together had requested that we ask for consideration tonight, so it wouldn't have to go to a second reading, and we'd adopt it this evening. Is that your understanding?
Yes, that's my understanding. I want to make sure that we don't deviate from that schedule that the finance director provided.
Well, I mean, that may be the staff's request, but I guess it's ultimately our prerogative if we're going to do that.
You're right, I thought there was a reason why it had to happen on the 7th. If it's not, then,
We could adopt both of them on the 7th.
Yeah. I should think about this
You're
for a
right.
minute.
you could do
Yeah.
one before the other. Okay. Thank you.
So just for clarity's sake, legal counsel, could you please
Oh, you're
state to
confused as I am.
everyone what the
I'm confused.
expectation is on this right now?
I believe the expectation tonight was it would be, approved tonight at the cow with first reading at council.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Correct.
Yes, I would concur with that.
And that follows our normal procedure. Got it. And that also allows us to get the answers to this critical question about paying more than our required.
Prepayment,
Prepayment,
avoiding any
thank you.
prepayment penalty on TIF number 7 debt,
Right.
which is the water and sewer revenue bonds.
So to be clear, unless there's more conversation to be had, please read the motion again so we understand the intent.
Sure. Alderman Macias moved to modify the amendment to explore tip number 7 bond refinancing and verify whether there is a prepayment penalty.
And
And
that was the modification, and the overall amendment was,
Well, we haven't voted on, oh, I'm sorry. I see what you're saying. So, it was to reallocate the full savings to the general fund with $400,000 applied to TIF number 7.
right? Do we understand that everything going into the general fund with the exploration of the 400,000 to come back to us with information? Question, yes, Mr. Vitas?
just so I've got the math straight, because I know Carol's not here, and Lori, you're paying attention, so it would be 400,000, subject to that discussion next week, going to the general fund, TIF number 7, and 472,000, I want the right number for the record, $472,902 to the general fund reserve.
to come back to us in January, I believe it
With
was.
budget
With
allocation.
allocation discussion.
In January.
Yes, Mr. Nguyen, question.
And so for clarification, it's gonna be more clarification, right? The 400,000 would pass through the general fund and then go towards, if this is the approach, a prepayment of the loan on TIF number 7 and be done as an advance from the general fund, which would show up as a, I guess, accounts receivable to the general fund, so that when TIF number 7 develops, that will be then paid back to the general fund?
Ms. Yulo.
Is that the intent?
The intent was to use the 400,000 as a transfer to TIF seven, not as an advance.
I can't support that.
Okay. Any other comments, questions, Mr. Nguyen?
Then if that's the case, then I think that we should modify this, that it travels through the general fund and is an advance to the TIF, so that once the TIF eventually starts to produce increment, it'll be paid back to the general fund, because the residents of Moline are paying that debt on it, and so they should be reimbursed when that TIF does create some income.
Is that a motion? of
So I'll
some
make
sort?
the motion that it goes through the general
Yeah.
fund.
We can't do that. Wait, we can't. We have to deal with one at a time.
Yeah, so vote on all amendments
Yep.
listed as motion. And
It can be an amendment to an amendment.
well, no. There's a motion and then, and you cannot make a motion to amend an amendment.
Yes, you can.
No.
I
It's-
guarantee you can. You can amend an amendment in Robert's rules.
I believe that it's voted.
Yes, that's where it is. That's where it lies.
And we have been violating this every time we do an amendment to an amendment.
No, Mr. Timian?
I believe we cannot amend an amendment to an amendment.
I
Right.
agree with that,
But
but we
no-
didn't amend it, we modified it.
The question
And it
is if
was-
the modification is an amendment.
Oh, okay.
No, modification is a separate thing.
Alright,
And that's what he's saying, so we can't amend the amendment.
Okay, thank you for the teamwork. Is there a second to that? Mr. Moyer is
I'm
seconding
sorry,
that.
could you repeat that?
You want it?
Yeah, I
Sorry.
don't
Yes.
wanna get
Yeah,
confused more
that
confused than I am.
the amount designated to go to TIF number 7 shall flow through the general fund and be identified as an advance to TIF number 7 from the general fund.
Got it.
Yes, questions, comments, Mr. Schmidt?
And as an advance, it's a loan,
Yeah,
right? By
exactly.
calling that the advance, which is what we want to be doing primarily.
100%.
Which we just discussed that a few weeks ago, correct?
Yeah.
It is
Yes.
a loan.
And then if we
Yeah.
don't do it this way, we were told a couple weeks ago that it wouldn't get paid back. And
Well,
that's
right, yeah,
correct.
and if it doesn't get paid back well, that's gonna
Exactly.
happen one way or the other. So, yeah, I think that is an easy one.
Mr. Waldron?
Am I missing something here? If we're paying it back to the general fund eventually, who gets it first? Water and sewer, who we've been borrowing from, or the general fund?
Okay, no.
Okay, we have to wait for, is
Good
it,
question.
No, that's a
this is a
legitimate
legitimate
question.
question.
That's an
That is
absolutely
the question.
legitimate question. We had budgeted, I think Carol had budgeted for it to happen, I don't know, down the road. She had that
Spreadsheet.
that spreadsheet that showed it getting paid. I've got no problem. I think she had stormwater being paid back first. Yeah, because, we modified it. We wanted stormwater to be paid back first, then general fund, then water and sewer last. We can always modify that if water and sewer's reserves start to deplete.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
the
That
question,
was done.
thank you for your question. I think
Yeah.
if we get too far afield, but we know we can come back to that question.
Your Honor, do we have a second on Alderman Wentz' motion?
Oh, that was Mr. Moyer.
Thank you.
All right, so I will probably need a little guidance on how many votes we need to take at the moment, because that was an amendment to amendment. I think we have 3. So this is the vote, then, hearing no more discussion on the loan motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes.
Got it?
Yes,
we-
Mr. Schmidt?
So as we look at the amendment, which was modified and with that, the caveat, from the legal perspective of how that's going to flow through on the information we have to provide after our next meeting for the tax levy, it's my understanding that nothing in that consideration set would actually change that, because all of that money would be going through the general fund. So that's what the information would need to be set up through the county. And so we'd have that opportunity to find out that, hey, we can't actually do it this way, to then revisit how to address that funding.
Right. So we are being responsible in terms of not rushing to a decision, but yet also being responsible to passing our budget or adopting the budget according to the timeline we need to do that on. And we still have built in time to address the distribution of that windfall, because we are working with the same levy numbers.
The levy does not change.
Correct. Okay. Any other questions on this
You have it?
motion?
Yeah.
Yes.
Lori, she's got her
Yes,
hand
thank
up.
you, Ms. Uloa.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
I just wanted to make sure that you understood that the ordinance part of it on the column that says amended will change slightly. The total will not change, but the first one in the general fund will say 872,902, which is the savings,
Yes,
which includes the 400,
yes,
and then we'll reduce the park fund and the library fund to
The former.
1,730,588 as it was, 584 as it was before, and 3,058,677 as it was before.
Thank
But
you.
the total stays the same. I just want to
Yeah,
make sure
the
you
bottom
understood
total
that
stays the
that
same.
ordinance will change.
thank you. Yes, Mr. Schmidt.
Hold on.
Yes, yes, sir.
On the line where it says general fund to TIF 7, that notation would also then need to
Yes.
change.
Yes,
It won't say that.
yes, yes.
We'll also cross that out.
It's just gonna say general fund and reserve, probably. Correct?
Excuse me?
Or just general fund?
It'll just say general fund.
Yes.
Thank you so much
Yes.
for making sure
I just
we,
wanted to clarify that.
yes.
And may I make another clarification?
Mm-hmm.
When you say you want to modify it to an advance to the TIF 7, we had already planned to do that through an advance, and that's why we suggested a transfer so you could reduce that advance by that 50%. But you've already voted on it, so so it will change back to the 8 million at the end.
Correct.
And you can
So-
choose to refinance whether or not you use the extra money here or not.
So what you're saying, I will call on you, Mr. Webb,
Okay.
but what you're saying is we're not actually saving the taxpayers' money if it goes the route we just did, the $5 million?
Well, you can still keep track of how much has been transferred over the years. And if the TIF develops as we hope it will, then you can pay that back also, but you still have a $4 million balance if we do just make it a transfer as
Right.
opposed to an advance.
Got it.
Can I go in on?
Wait.
On the spreadsheet that Carol provided, which were the updates to the financials, if you go to the one spreadsheet, projected cash advances to other funds, what Lori's referring to is under TIF 7, with the $380,000 being moved, it would, over a period of the next 14 years, it would bring down the final payment, $4,102,253. That number in the original budget books that you saw was 9.2 million. So the net effect of transferring or loaning the money to TIF 7 from this windfall is to bring that number down
Okay,
from
so we-
9.2, 14 years from now, down to 4.1 million.
That's
And this
what,
becomes an annual
correct.
movement of that savings over. It's dedicating that 300 and, what was that number? It's 354, it's now 400.
Yeah.
So it's dedicating that, kind of restricting it,
But we're
to
only
send
doing
it
that
in
for
there.
this year. We haven't tied the hands of next year's.
Yeah, this is a projection, assuming that the council would agree to the projection, because this is only for fiscal '22, which brings the payment down, at least, brings it down to 638, 278. That's what's due next year.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Schmidt?
Forgive the very simple question, but that projection is assuming no growth in TIF 7.
That is
Right,
correct.
that's assuming that the
Right.
TIF,
No increment.
that there is no growth.
That is correct.
Correct. Great. Thank you so much for your
Thank you.
clarity. All right. Any further comment? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. One more vote
Yeah, the amendment.
on the
On the
amended
amended
motion.
Now.
On the amended motion, thank you. Could you please, does anyone need it read? No, okay. Any further comment, question? Hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you very much. We have no other this evening, correct?
No.
So we move to our informationals, please, Chief Galt, and KJ Whitley, please. Prioritized use of general public assistance funds.
Good evening, council. Ms. Whitley and myself appear before you tonight to talk about $60,000 for fiscal year 2022 that you allocated in the workshop back in October when we sat through and did all the different spreadsheets. And one thing we want to just briefly come in front of you today is to make sure that we had clarity on your intent for the use of those funds. So before KJ and I start working on a policy on how to spend those funds, probably through our connection with QC Open Network as well as KJ's programs that she manages, we wanted to make sure that we were on the same page with you and consensus with you. In consulting with Lori today on the ARPA funds, this is restricted dollars, we clarified that these funds could be used for rental assistance. So Lori was gracious enough to carve out some time for us today to research those Government Finance Officers Association rules and guidelines for the use of expenditure categories. And they include negative economic impacts and include a variety of different options in this area of general public assistance, such as household assistance for food, rent, mortgage, utility aid, cash transfers, internet access, eviction programs, unemployment benefits, etc. So we've been meeting about these and in our wish to join QC Open Network and try to work with rental assistance and identifying gaps. The mayor has convened some, with Alderman Moyer, some working groups on housing insecurity. And we recognize that our biggest ability to help and the gap that we see is directly in lodging. And so what we just want to kind of get a feel from you is if you support that direction for that $60,000 to be used for lodging and related expenses only. And we would set up the program to assist people with emergency shelter, rental assistance, rental down payment, and potentially storage units if they're displaced and had to put some stuff in storage. And a lot of these things, and KJ can comment on them in greater detail, I don't have this expertise, but there's no existing or limited existing programs that can help our residents or people that are in our community. For example, storage units are not authorized for some funding programs that she manages. Some other programs that we're using right now have very long wait lines for getting in front of the program. So we would like to, it's only $60,000. Seems like a lot of money, but it can go fast when rent's $750. And KJ can talk about some of the rules that she wants, but we want to keep it in those categories of just lodging and related expenses. We're not gonna get into clothes, food, household goods, substance abuse treatment, medical expenses, or those other areas which we know that there are other community support programs that exist. And we wanna focus those dollars specifically on lodging and related expenses. So with that, we would just, I don't know that we need a vote, we just kind of want to maybe a consensus that you're in support of that before we draft the fine details of that.
Mr. O'Brien?
Do we have any kind of feel that the lodging, with the evictions and everything, I mean, you guys probably know from being on the committee, that this is gonna be an issue, lodging for people, that there's gonna be a lot of evictions, is that why it's all going to lodging?
Well, yes, and KJ might be answer that in greater detail, but yes, we feel that lodging is the primary gap that is facing our citizens right now, in the area that we can help the most. Then we know the other programs are already tapped out.
Yeah, as of 10 days ago, we had 55 people on the waiting list for rental assistance. We just signed another contract with Salvation Army, giving them another 40,000. But we just don't have enough funds there, just in the city itself.
And one other area that is very difficult for us to manage is emergency shelter. So just recently, we had an incident where we were trying to assist someone, couldn't access these funds quite yet. We need to get somebody into a hotel that had children, and we needed to get some of those funds. It was tough. I think we're still working. I'm trying to get that paid, but trying to get that emergency shelter is very difficult. A lot of times people can't provide the income documents, or aren't prepared, to trying to get them into a hotel quickly, and then work on the connection with a long-term rental is a little bit more established. But we want to try to keep those dollars focused, so we don't start going off on a bunch of different directions and we dilute that pool instantaneously.
I've had a number of 55 people on the waiting list. Please keep in mind that people are now starting to reach out because they're starting to get no assistance. So they're in dire need of assistance.
Mr. Went?
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I know that there's Salvation Army, there's Project Now. I know IDA is doing a new round starting on December 6th. And so there are lots of programs out there for rental assistance. And they don't always move as fast. I know a lot of people ask you and ask Project Now, and so while they're on your list, they're on 3 other people's lists until they get the money from wherever. I would like us to, and so because there are options for those assistants in other locations, I really like the idea of focusing on some of these things that there are no other options for. The emergency shelter that is quick, the storage unit if displaced. I think $60,000, while it sounds like a lot of money, like you said, it will get burned through. I just don't want it to use a good chunk of it duplicating things that the state is having a hard time. I mean, they've got more money than they know what to do with it at IDA. They just, their website, they misprogrammed, and so they had to stop. I mean, they've got the money, they just have to get it out to people. But I think us focusing on things that there are no other options for is probably where I would like us to see us use that money.
Yeah, and I think our hope is that once we get on board with QC Open Network, you'll learn a little bit more about that. My understanding from that program is that we can kind of greenlight a dashboard on the back end, whereas that searches around and it realizes, okay, this person's a Moline resident, they've got some money available, it's connect them with that staff member. And we can coordinate with those other programs a little bit better. I mean, it's going to be a little growing pains as we try to figure that out. But we know that there's these gaps, and I recognize, and I'm not quite as in depth of it as IDA, but some of this paperwork is ridiculous, and we can't get people, they can't produce the documents fast enough. And meanwhile, we're trying to get them assistance, or we're trying to deal with them in law enforcement. KJ's trying to help out on the rental assistance, and we can't match these services up fast enough that this money might be available for those instances. Other people that qualify for other programs, I think that we're already directing them there, KJ's directing them there, and we'll continue to do so.
It can also be used if there's like a fire or somebody to.
We'd rather not cooperate with the fire department.
Mr. Moyer?
Thank you, but I was gonna address that, but the chief did a great job.
Okay.
Because we don't want to duplicate, so we talked quite a bit about not duplicating services that are out there, but there are those moments where someone doesn't fit into a program,
Yep.
and that's why it was written this way, and I appreciate that.
Mr. O'Brien?
Should the need arise for more money, we can always amend, right?
Yes, you can. You still have excess funds available. in
So
our
there's that. I mean, if you, like you said, 60,000, it looks like a lot of money to me, but it's not a lot of money in today's dollars. It's just not.
I would say that, right, we can amend, but eventually the ARPA dollars are a finite resource, and so we do need to be thinking about, in our future budgets, what are the resources coming in that could be directed to a sustainable emergency shelter fund, et cetera, right? So that sustainability question, I would like to suggest to staff to keep that in mind, even as we move through years using ARPA dollars. We do need to address the sustainability of this.
I think just like pavement condition indexes and stuff like that, the data will help us inform you later on of where we're at with what we're seeing on the ground level, right? Of what we're dealing with. We can come back and say, we've had 28 families, the money's gone, this is where it went, this went in 6 weeks or 6 months. And you can decide at that time what tolerance you have to fund those programs.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? So, is your guidance clear enough that we're
Yep.
okay with this as long as it's
We're
not
just looking for consensus
duplicating?
if you approve of that plan.
Yeah, we've doing our thumbs up consensus, head nod consensus. Thank you so much.
Alright, thank you.
All right, last informational is a video gaming update. Did you have any updates, Ms. Christopoulos, since the last time we had this discussion?
And there was some, inquiry about the impact of House Bill 3136 of amendment. I'd like to report that it is still on the governor's desk.
I didn't think it got signed yet.
Now, if passed, if signed, what it does to your motion to increase the fee to establishments and operators per terminal, is that there is a provision in that bill that requires any fees related to gaming use to be split equally by establishments and operators. I'm not really sure what that means.
So, well, that sounds like it means, a layperson's interpretation, it sounds like it means none of that passes through the city, then it's strictly, the increase in fee gets split 50-50 between two different groups. No, I'm misunderstanding that, we don't know yet?
No, so,
Mr. Wen,
yeah, so I guess I'll explain that and then I got a follow-up question. So we implemented a $1,200 fee on the terminal owners.
Right.
So it was a fee not paid by the operator or the tavern or whatever, but it was actually the operator who owns the machine itself. So it was $1,200 for each machine for their license per year. And if my understanding is the provision of this would say, if you're charging $1,200 for that machine, that $1,200 has to be split $600 to the owner operator and then $600 to the terminal.
That would.
And they pay it and that money comes to the city.
I see.
Right.
So now with statutes that are passed, and I don't know what the vote was on it, when he signs it, when does it go into effect? It's the following July?
It's effective whenever it's approved to be honestly, right now, don't know the effective dates.
Because isn't there provision in with the statute that unless it's a supermajority that has, then there's some delay, and that's why we have so many ordinance, in Illinois start on January 1st or July 1st or.
Right, but I don't know what happened here. Let me look at it. Well, I scroll.
Well,
I will point out also that in addition to the 1,200 per terminal for operators, there's a $50 per terminal for the establishment.
Right.
The tavern or whatever. So when I say I'm not really sure how this will operate, the new language, I mean, will that then require us to bill the establishment and the operator by split that fee per establishment, and then they share that?
I mean, that
It's
seems.
So we still,
it's just not clear.
so we still have more follow-up on that one, and because we're still in the informational gathering stage, Ms. Kostopoulos could bring that back, figured out once we have ordinance update language
Right, but
in
I
front
had
of us.
I had a second portion of that question was, what I would like to see is, if we do that, do we have the ability to give the local operators a credit for the food and beverage tax that they pay? So in essence, if they paid $600 in food and beverage tax, their portion of it, they get a credit back for it, and the terminal operator would still have to pay their $600, but they would get a credit back. Is that a possibility?
That is a possibility.
Okay, so then we could charge $5,000 per terminal and then give them a credit back on those. Okay.
So by the way, the law takes effect upon
Becoming what?
Law.
Becoming law.
takes
Becoming law.
effect upon signing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for that update. And I wanted to provide, as promised, an update on the listening session, discussion session that happened last night at the library. Thank you to those that could be there as witness and listeners. The room was packed with a variety of generations represented, which I thought was very good, with a variety of perspectives represented. And I thought I would just quickly go through my notes for you all. There were many comments about the reason behind the state allowing us to go to 6 machines, and us giving the establishments that option helps balance the revenues that the state is taking. And so we are following up on what percentage of money goes to the state, et cetera, details that were brought up last night. Many people mentioned it was I would say, and those of you that were there could remind or clarify, but very much much more positive feedback on moving to 6 machines, on lifting the cap on Class B, but there were some suggestions, for how that looks in different restaurants so that it's not in your face all the time. There was not much feedback on the question about location restrictions or, distances between establishments. On advertising restrictions, that question, the comments were, don't have any more, don't really change anything, no more than or less than we have right now. And no general feedback on this, again, the spacing between establishments. So Does that cover it, those of you that were there?
Good summary.
Yes, Mr.
Did,
Nguyen.
did you say there was some confusion? Because doesn't the state, they take 30%?
Yeah, there wasn't confusion, we just wanted to clarify the numbers, the percentages, that's all. And there were questions on how much do we actually make in the percent of our budget that this income generates, or it goes into our budget, and I believe you checked on this with with Keith today, right? And it was 0.74%, it was under 1% recently, so. That's the impact to the overall budget in Moline. Any further comments, questions, considerations? Yes,
Yeah,
Mr. Schmidt.
And there may be no good way to answer this, and that's okay, I guess, but do we have an understanding of how many people in the audience were representing businesses versus representing kind of just their personal opinions as well?
There was a mixture because some of the business owners do live in Moline.
Certainly.
So they wore both hats. There were plenty of business owners represented in the room, but I did call specifically for, because in my line of work, we always want to look at your argument plus the naysayer argument. And once that was asked for, there were more people that offered an opposing viewpoint. And so, we could, if you would like, we could do an online survey if you want to get a broader swath of the community. We've been seeing good results from that. I think that, that's certainly possible, but I think we've had multiple discussions too, and I think we need to we're at a point where we need to see the ordinance language again in front of us now that we've given feedback to our legal counsel to make an update. Yes, Mr. Nguyen.
Yeah, I just, if we're talking about what we want to see, I still believe that our ordinance is clear enough that says for a tavern that the primary purpose is the drinking and consuming of alcohol on premises. And so if you are not making 50% of your income from that as your primary, you are not the tavern. And I think we're running into, because of our non-enforcement of that, I think Christopher D's is turning into a K license, but they got a B license because we don't enforce our ordinance.
Right, and you make a great point. And that's just because that's a city enforcement issue. That wasn't in the basket of questions I posed to the group. But point well made that class issue, an enforcement issue, is something we need to address.
So I guess I would like us to move to direct staff to enforce our ordinance with the understanding that the primary purpose is at least 50% of your revenue comes from that, from consuming alcohol on premises.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
All right, so we are talking about a motion to go with 50% as the definition of primary. That was a question we were going to have legal counsel come back to us then. That's what your intent is, Mr. Nguyen? To go with the 50%?
I'd like to have the conversation, so that's how I'm starting it.
All right, so motion by Alderman Nguyen, seconded by Alderman Waldron, I believe. Discussion, Mr. Timian.
Didn't we just recently direct staff to come back with the ordinance with 50% as a starting point, but then we could discuss it at a further time?
You're saying yes.
So are
we
we
did
just-
in our previous conversation.
Are we just preempting, just throwing that out, or are we?
I think what we did was we asked you to come back with more clarity on the definitions of primary and secondary. That's how I recall it, but Mr. Nguyen is saying, let's just go with 50% as meaning primary. Yes, Ms. Kostopoulos.
So there were a number of specifics that was included. And you're correct, Alderman, that was as a starting. Others really depended on what the results of the public comment, might be in, House Bill 3136. So we're not quite ready to present something to you. We're a lot further along today, obviously, with, community comment, and whatnot, but, I wonder, and I don't believe that we settled on anything last time about how do we measure that, 50%, let's say. Is that annual, is it by the month, is it quarterly?
What would your,
Yeah, I think we had this conversation, we had talked about it being annual. I mean, from month to month, you have 1 month that was up or down, or we had a weird issue in a particular month, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But over a 12-month period of time, if that's not what your primary business is, then that's not the correct license for you to have. And so, and I understand the hesitancy on this because it isn't something that we've enforced. We've as a council, we've asked staff over the years to enforce it, and it just hasn't happened. And it needs to be something that is discussed, that is clarified if there's others out there that don't think what primary is. And so I want to get this at least started because these things tend to just bleed out. We ask for things to come back and it's months and months later and
well,
it doesn't
we,
happen.
we,
So-
I will call on you in a minute. We are on a timeline because we believe the renewal
Exactly.
period is January 31st. So the intention is to have this conversation settled through a second reading of an ordinance update before that.
Right,
So, we are moving and I do believe that the sooner we get this updated, the better for the businesses that need that sixth machine, because we did hear last night, right? There's revenue not coming in because we didn't go with what was on the council agenda several months ago to just bump it up to 6. So that is unfortunate in my opinion, but now that we're here, let's move this forward as thoroughly and quickly as we can so that we can get people back in business better. Yes, Mr. Schmidt?
I have,
I'm sorry.
I've got two issues. The first is that I do not believe that the definition within our ordinance supports the motion. I do not think what is written there it can be reasonably interpreted as 50%, just as reasonably as it could not be. And you could argue it differently. So, I mean, on that issue as to enforcing it on that, I think puts us into a dangerous place when we're going to be clarifying it in the coming month. I also do not believe that 50% is the right threshold. I think that, I mean, your point is taken about some of those institutions and needing to draw a line at an appropriate threshold. But I think you could look at, we need to look at it and understand, because if a business comes and they put in the machines and they were doing fine, but now they're doing great, it is starting to punish them because these machines became more profitable than their primary business. And whereas there are some, I mean, you get under that 20-25% threshold, I think you really start to see like there's a point where it is clear that they're doing what you're saying. But my concern, longer term, I think less than 50% is appropriate, but shorter term, I really don't think our ordinance lets us enforce it at that level.
Any other comments on the motion on the table? Yes, Mr. Williams?
I agree. I think that the state's made liquor licenses and now gaming synonymous. So to say 50% is not fair, especially coming out of COVID. I think the definition of a tavern or establishments like that, they're reinventing themselves. And I think by going with 50%, we could wipe out quite a few small businesses in Moline unintentionally just by enforcing what we have on the books. I think we have to be fluid enough to
to look at that and look at something like a 20-25%, especially coming out of COVID. I don't think we'll ever have true, real numbers for a while. And I think we'll hamstring them and right at a time where they can get the sex machine and generate some more money. I remind the council, we do not have a gaming boat or any gambling here in Moline like we do in our other cities. That was taken from us some time back, and we can get into that. So all we have is what we have in our establishments. And I don't think it's unfair, I think it's very unfair to now come to enforce the law after they've taken advantage of it, wipe out those businesses, encourage a new business to start, and as soon as their gaming goes over 50%, we'll shut them down. I think we say that we're open to business and we want to support small business, but then we turn around and we talk about doing something like this without looking at the ordinance, and maybe we change to conform to what's actually taking place.
Mr. Went.
And I don't disagree with you, but what you're doing is you're reducing the level to just make more K licenses. I mean, if we want more K licenses, fine, let's have more K licenses. But to artificially say or make some kind of argument that primary means 20 or 25%, that's not their primary business. So a B license needs to be someone who their primary is the consumption of alcohol on premises. If we want more K licenses or people who are only doing 10, 15, 20% of their business of other things and taking in 75% of their business through gambling, then we should have that conversation. I don't disagree with you. I'm not looking to put them out of business. I'm just saying this is the problem that has happened in the city and in this council for a long time, is that we have ordinances on the books and then we don't enforce them because of other issues, or that won't be fair to them. Then we need to change the ordinance. This is ridiculous that what we do is we bend over backwards to not enforce what we have on the books, rather than taking the difficult decisions and taking the difficult votes and making those modifications. If you guys say, okay, but I want to increase the K licenses to 10, and some of these people can switch over to that, we can have that discussion. That's not a problem. But to say that our taverns, because this is exactly what's happening down at Christopher D's, is we agreed that somebody could trade in their K license and switch to a different location if they became a tavern. But what they're doing is they're going in and becoming a K license, but just saying they're a B license. And that is exactly the opposite of what we are trying to achieve here.
Point taken. Thank you, Ms. Christopoulos.
Maybe we could expand the definition beyond just the percentage of revenue. Maybe we could include number of seats, or a full service bar, or a full service kitchen, like other places.
That's your multi-factor piece
Right.
of putting the label together. This is true. I also think was a great comment reminder that diversifying our economic development is really important. I think that any discussion about broadening classes or the especially K, right? That needs to go through economic development, because that's a whole different scenario than the bars and restaurants, that the Class Bs that we could lift the cap on. Lifting the cap solves a ton of problems in terms of bars and restaurants having this ability. But I think that some of this needs to be run through economic development because of the diversification of businesses that we need in the city. So I would say, I mean, we need to take a vote fairly soon on this motion on the table, but it sounds like there's still discussion to be had on this definition, we'd like to, if you could give us a sample one, that would be good for us to react to in the next meeting. Are there further comments on this motion? Mr. O'Brien?
I guess I'm concerned about the enforceability of any kind of ordinance like that, because, I mean, you know, you want them to consume more alcohol? I mean, the drunk driving laws years ago, and I think we got some tavern owners here can tell you that that's not a good idea. Years ago, we have drunk driving laws that limit the amount that you can consume at a tavern and drive home. And I guess what, we want more people to go to the tavern and drink and use the gaming machines? Or I don't know what the enforceability is on this. I'm not in favor, these guys aren't gonna like me now, I'm not in favor of the machines in general, so I guess I don't have a dog in the fight, but I don't know how you enforce something like that. If the machines start getting successful, we're gonna come in and penalize them now. That just doesn't make any sense to me. And you wanna give them more permits, that's your remedy to have the, what is it, the strictly gambling places?
That's
I don't-
okay. No,
That's K.
No, that,
no,
no,
I'm not
that's
advocating
not
for
on
that.
the table, it's just
But
lifting the cap
well,
on Class
it will
B.
be, it will be,
Lifting
if
the
we do
class
this.
cap on Class B.
But I just don't, I don't think that's where we wanna go.
Thank you. Mr. Moore?
Thank you. I think it was clear last night, and it's been clear in discussions I've had, that the majority of the citizens of Moline do not want more Class Ks. And we have, what we're saying is we want to try to tighten up the opportunity for establishments to present themselves as a Class A or a Class B, but in essence act as a Class A or Class K. For instance, we have a gas station that operates as a restaurant just so that they can have a gaming license when their restaurant doesn't have any tables or any servers. Or, you know, it's a gas station that has a Class A license but has 5 slot machines. They're essentially a Class K, if you follow what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that's understood.
So I think we just need to look at at how we do this. And yeah, I'm in favor of allowing, if we're going to allow some bars, I mean, we would allow all bars to have a few machines. I am absolutely okay with that. And I'm fine with the 6 machines as well, if that's what we do. I just think we need to tighten it up and say no to more Class Ks.
Thank you. So, here, Mr. Went.
So, based on the conversation here, and I think that I'd like to continue this conversation next week, so, and allow staff to come back with some actual language and everything. I'm gonna move to table this to next week's agenda and have the vote then, and hopefully we'll have some additional
You're
information.
tabling your motion.
I'm moving to table till next week.
I'll second that.
All right, motion by Alderman Went, seconded by Alderman Timian. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
All right, that's 7 to 1. We'll bring this back next week with
Something
some
about
more
those.
information from, no, that was Alderman Walker.
Thank you.
Okay, any public comment? Hearing none, we will close out this meeting and move to our regular council agenda. Pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do you have an invocation?
I
Mr.
don't, Your
Macias?
Honor.
No? Thank you. Roll call, please.
Alderman Williams,
Present.
Macias,
Present.
Went,
Present.
Timian,
Present.
Moyer,
Present.
O'Brien,
Present.
Waldron,
Present.
Schmidt.
Present.
Your Honor, I request approval of Committee of the Whole Council and Executive Session Minutes of November 16th, 2021. Resolutions. Council Bill 1225-2021, a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute and attest to an addendum for professional engineering services with DeWalt Hamilton Associates Incorporated for 16th Street corridor analysis and design improvements for an amount not to exceed $24,700.
Motion
To
approved.
approve consent agenda.
Thank you, Alderman Schmidt. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All in sorry. Roll call, please.
Alderman Macias.
Aye.
Went.
Aye.
Timian.
Aye.
Moyer.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Waldron.
Aye.
Schmidt.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays. And that motion passes. Non-consent agenda resolutions. Get a hold of it. Council Bill 1226-2021, a resolution authorizing the city administrator to execute an agreement with Strategic Government Resources to provide administrative services to fulfill the interim staffing need for the position of Community and Economic Development Director.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Went, seconded by Alderman Schmidt.
Roll call.
Roll call, please.
Alderman
Let's
Macias?
just wait. Yeah, don't we have discussion?
We can.
Yes, you
Discussion?
can.
Hearing none, roll call, please.
Alderman Macias?
Aye.
Went?
Aye.
Timian?
Aye.
Moyer?
Aye.
O'Brien?
Aye.
Waldron?
Aye.
Schmidt?
Aye.
Williams?
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays. And that motion passes. Council Bill 1227-2021, a resolution authorizing the city administrator to execute an agreement with Strategic Government Resources to provide administrative services to fulfill the interim staffing need for the position of city engineer.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Went, seconded by Alderman Macias. Discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Alderman Macias?
Aye.
Went?
Aye.
Timian?
Aye.
Moyer?
Aye.
O'Brien?
Aye.
Waldron?
Aye.
Schmidt?
Aye.
Williams?
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays, and that motion passes. Council Bill 1228-2021, a resolution authorizing the city administrator to execute an agreement with Temps USA LLC to provide administrative services to fulfill the interim staffing need for the position of Director of Public Works.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alderman O'Brien, seconded by Alderman Went. Discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Alderman Macias?
Aye.
Went?
Aye.
Timian?
Aye.
Moyer?
Aye.
O'Brien?
Aye.
Waldron?
Aye.
Schmidt?
Aye.
Williams?
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays. And that motion passes. First reading ordinances. Council Bill 3035-2021, an ordinance amending Council Bill General Ordinance Number 3031-2021 and assessing taxes for the city of Moline, Illinois for the tax levy year 2021, collectible in the year 2022, enacting an ordinance relating to the same subject matter. And that is all I have this evening, Your Honor.
Thank you. Miscellaneous business. Mr. Williams.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Macias.
Nothing, Your
Mr.
Honor.
Moore.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Mr. Timian.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. I attended the Bi-State Regional Transportation meeting today, and, everyone's really excited about the I-74 bridge. Tomorrow, that was a big topic of conversation amongst many other plans for reconstruction on I-80 and the 280 interchange and intersection up in Iowa. We also had an opportunity to talk a bit about the new infrastructure bill and how those funds can be allocated. While it obviously hasn't been divvied up by city, there will be opportunities to apply these funds to bikeways projects, accessibility with sidewalks, as well as a number of our other infrastructure projects. And there will be a number of grants available as well that we will apply for, some of which can even be for railroad overpasses or skipping. So I'm just really looking forward to the ability to take advantage of these. And the hope is that we can use some of our allocated CIP projects already and maybe just reallocate those funds elsewhere. So it was a pretty exciting meeting and a lot of possibilities for that. So thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Moyer.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I had sent an email out earlier asking a question. Actually, we've been emailing for a while. There was a little bit of a break in there. But I was curious if there's any updates that could be provided to the council on where we stand with applicants for the marijuana dispensaries. And I don't know if that's something that we can talk about.
Sure.
Yeah, in fact, he told us some of that, I believe last week, but that's okay.
Right, that they're coming. In our ordinance, there's a specific portion of it that requires that an applicant do a traffic study and provide, or at least provide some type of information assurances to the city that their parking and that their traffic patterns will be adequate to the scope of their business or whatnot. And I was just curious where we're at in that project. And we were, or at least I was under the understanding when we passed the ordinance a year and a half ago or so, that when that applicant did those studies, that it would then come back to the council and we would actually be able to look at it against, how it would impact the city at that time. We just need to get something on the books and we would come back and talk about it. My concern is that we're just going to find, they're going to open up before we ever talk about it again, and then we're going to end up having this traffic mess and parking mess. And I'm just curious where we're at in the process, and will we actually get to talk about it, or is it, I trust the staff to take care of it. I'm concerned about the traffic.
Want me to address that?
Yeah.
We've had, to date, in the last 5 months, 2 meetings in total. One meeting several months ago that really went nowhere with a gentleman from Michigan who happened to secure a license here in Illinois, who has dispensaries up in Michigan. And then more recently, I think I brought to your attention, we had another licensee with the state who has a license, was looking at a Moline location on the avenue, actually 2 locations on the avenue, and had explored the other alternatives as well, and then settled on the avenue. They have not come back with a proposal for the site. They were provided with the ordinance, so they understand what the requirements are in terms of going forward in order to gain approval for the license. But there are issues. Obviously, parking is an issue. We talked about that during the meeting. That is, in some respects, sometimes driving the site. Traffic is another thing that drives the site. They were using their national real estate company that sites and locates these dispensaries in different parts of the country, and they had them here at the table as well. So we're just waiting to hear back, and when we do hear back, we will bring that information forward to council.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Wan.
Was there any discussion on that? Because one of our sites is, I think, TIF number 6, out at 150 and just outside of Coal Valley. And I just wanted to make sure the staff was aware that that was one of the reasons why we identified that spot, was one, because it was not too far off the interstate. It's an intersection of a couple of different state highways, but it was also within a TIF, and so that there would be the possibility for some tax increment and to do it the correct way. And quite honestly, it's on the outskirts of town as well. And so I just wanted to make sure that we were aware of that as staff, and that we're communicating that, because that could be a location that might be attractive to
We do share the locations with them. We have a locational map that shows which zones the overlay exists, so that if they're interested, they can look. And they did take a look at that site as well.
And you guys talked about the TIF?
I believe we did talk about the TIF with them a little bit. I think what drives these locations, from what I'm seeing, and I've seen quite a few of them go up in the Chicago metro area, and they're usually on streets very comparable to the avenue, where there's a lot of other commercial, there's a lot of high visibility, and the signage is easily visible. And along the interstates or along the major highways that come in and out of the city, that's where you're seeing all the billboards go up, and then within a short distance, that's where the dispensaries are dropping. So I think, like any commercial industry, because it is a commercial industry, they're looking for traffic count. Visibility and traffic count is what will drive their sales. And advertising. I mean, when you come in on, the old I-5, when you come in, you can see the sign that says, in Milan. If you want it, go to Milan. So I'm sure they'll put advertising there. If you want it, go to Moline too. So.
That's, thank you for that. I just think, so there's been so much turnover not only in council, but in staff. It's probably a good idea to review our ordinance and make sure that it, or at least just get re-educated on it and kind of understand where we're at on that. But I appreciate it, and that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman. Mr. O'Brien?
Sure. Thank you, Your Honor. I went to the Plastics Consortium meeting, which is basically a meeting of the cities that, from Missouri, Iowa, different states on the upper Mississippi, I think Wisconsin is in it, they were talking about the app that they use to have people go out and study the plastics. No surprise, Moline gets a lot of refuse dumped out because we're in the middle of everything. People throw stuff out probably more than any place else because we've got the airport, we're in between Moline and Rock Island. We're just kind of in the middle of everything. Lots of cigarette butts. Moline has, I think they established that we had the most cigarette butts being thrown out. I don't know how they came to that conclusion because that's
Well, we can use
mind-boggling to
that.
try and think of that. Also, not surprisingly, around our big box stores, plastic bags.
Oh, yeah.
And I found out that Iowa and Missouri, not in Illinois. Illinois, we can restrict plastic bags. We can actually ban them. It's not against our state constitution, but in Iowa and Missouri, they made a law where you cannot ban plastic bags. So that's
Jeez.
from the great state that gave us the fireworks. They also made it so you can't ban plastic bags. So, but basically I'm gonna try and get you some more, because I think there's gotta be like a handout with it that I'd like to distribute.
They distributed an internal document, so we're looking for the external.
I'd like to get the council some more information so they can be more informed on it. And I think it'd be, I mean, to me, I'd like to see the plastic bags banned at least at the big box stores, because they can do it. They have the ability to do it. We don't even have Walgreens. I mean, the drugstores don't even have a paper option. You bring your own reusable. You can do that now, which you couldn't at the start of COVID. You can start bringing your own recyclable bag in again.
Yeah.
But it might be something for legal to look at some point. That these bags are, you know, I see in my neighborhood. I walk my dogs every morning. There's always plastic bags laying around, and they're just, you know, something that needs to go out of our. But that's really all I had on it, and I'll try to get you some more information about the meeting.
Thank you.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Nothing, Your Honor.
All right. All I have is updates coming to you about the childcare infrastructure proposal that's nearing completion. It's under review with legal, all the details of applying for the program and how the money is available and all of those things that we talked about back in October. That's been worked on diligently by an advisory group. Also, the environmental solutions working group I put together with Mr. O'Brien. A few of us were able to meet for our first meeting. So we're planning to try to do a lot of data assessment, like what's already out there, what opinions are already out there about a variety of environmental solutions. And this is connected to our core value of stewardship of the environment. So always trying to tie this work back like that. I also have a working group with Mr. Kuhlenbeck and Mr. Lodi, Leah, Ms. Miller, and our superintendent. We're working on a public works internship or apprenticeship associated with the high school students. So we'll have our third meeting, I think it's next week, to gather some more input from high school administrators, et cetera. So those things are ongoing. And that's all I have. How about you?
I'm gonna pass tonight.
Okay. Yes, Mr.
Your Honor, I make a motion that the council convene an executive session for the purpose of discussion of pending probable or imminent litigation 5 ILCS 122C11 and security procedures for potential danger 5 ILCS 122C8.
Second.
All right, motion by Alderman Williams, seconded by Alderman Went. Roll call, please.
That's a new one.
Macias.
Aye.
Went.
Aye.
Timian.
Aye.
Moyer.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Waldron.